This is the BioCentury Show.
Brought to you by the 13th China Healthcare Summit. Join BioCentury, Bay Helix, and Insights partner McKinsey & Company in Shanghai, November 2nd to 4th, for a first-hand look at China's innovation moment.
Hello, and welcome to the BioCentury Show. I'm Lindsay Martin, biopharma analyst at BioCentury, and today I'm joined by Jessica Owens, a partner at Initiate Ventures, where she backs and co-founds AI-native healthcare companies at the whiteboard stage. And prior to launching Initiate Ventures, Jessica spent about 2 decades moving between the lab, the boardroom, and even the cap table. And she spent time in public health, doing research at the CDC. She worked in cancer biology at Stanford. And then she was even an investing partner at Kleiner Perkins and co-founded GRAIL and helped launch a multi-cancer early detection blood test and build GRAIL into an $8 billion company. So Jessica, welcome to our show today.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into how you launched Initiate Ventures. I know your thesis really focuses on AI healthcare companies at the earliest stage of investment. So you're founding or you're co-founding companies when you have conviction in them, and then you're backing companies as well. Can you talk a little bit about what that thesis looks like? How did that evolve? And how did you kind of decide on what sector you would want to invest in?
Sure. Yeah. So maybe first about Initiate. So we largely invest and we co-found on occasion with entrepreneurs when we have a lot of conviction about a space. We're very thesis driven, so we do a lot of work up front in areas working with scientists, experts to build a thesis around a specific area, and we can maybe talk more about those later. And we like to invest very, very early. It's what Yana and I both know very well, having been founders ourselves, and our co-founder, Randy Scott, who was part of forming Initiate with us, has also been a serial entrepreneur and taken 3 companies public over the span of his career. And so that's something really important to us, is to sort of get in early, really when, companies are kind of getting from 0 to 1. And so that could be with a check, or it could be, working with an entrepreneur even before there is really a business. The other thing that's important to us is, we like to invest with a check that's big enough to own a lot and be with companies over the long term. And I think that kind of dates back to when I was at Kleiner. Kleiner had a much bigger healthcare and life sciences practice at the time. It was a really long time ago, about 20 years ago now. And that's just sort of a philosophy that was part of how I learned how to invest in companies and to be with companies over the long term, because there are a lot of ups and downs, and these things take a long time to work. And, GRAIL was an anomaly in that sense. It was sort of start to finish about 5 years, which is actually pretty unusual in what we do. And so, that's kind of our thesis around how we work and the parameters. Maybe from a sector's perspective, we invest in health tech and I guess what many people define as tech bio now. We don't invest in therapeutic assets. And so maybe that's a distinction. We don't invest in ag tech, and we don't invest in implantable medical devices. So sometimes it's easier to sort of say what we don't invest in than what we do. We do invest in pretty much everything else. And we like to say we invest in sort of the intersection of, we used to say technology and healthcare and life sciences. Now, of course, that is largely AI, healthcare and life sciences. But that can be across verticals of, diagnostics, tools. There's new verticals than there used to be, and sometimes companies don't really fit squarely within one. So it's really hard to describe, I think, very early stage companies from a specific vertical perspective. But for example, I have a company that is in the space of building scalable, reproducible human cells for research, right? So there's R&D purposes there, but over time, their platform could be used to actually build and manufacture the cell therapies themselves. That's not what they're doing today, but that can be done in the future. And so it's kind of hard to pin them into a single vertical. So that's a little bit about the firm. And we founded the firm because we saw this sort of white space in the ecosystem to be sort of founder first, both of us having been founders ourselves, and then to really specialize in these areas where we had a ton of experience. Of course, I've worked in a lot of diagnostic companies, but Jana has also worked in a lot of health tech companies. She was at GE Ventures, which built at the time really the largest digital health practice, early days in sort of that entire world, back when we were talking about digital health, and it was new.
Right.
So these are areas we've really been working in for decades, both of us. And so watching the evolution of these sectors has been just, a joyride for so many years. And we wanted to specialize very early and be able to do that with entrepreneurs in sort of whichever way worked best for where that entrepreneur was and what fit.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit more about, why not a pure biotech asset focused company, right? Like that's a hard line that you're drawing. And, what are you trying to achieve by not focusing on those types of companies?
Yeah, so I have a ton of respect for those businesses and the entrepreneurs who run them. The reality is they take a boatload of capital. And just from the way that we like to run our portfolio and the construction of that portfolio, we like to own a lot up front and be able to support those companies over their life cycle and defend those positions over time. It just takes way, way larger funds than what we have. And then the other thing is, I think that to do that really well, I worked with some really great clinical developers and people who know clinical development like the back of their hand. And I think it's something you really have to know well to do well. I personally don't believe in dabbling in therapeutic development. And so for those reasons, we don't invest in therapeutics today. And I often say not yet, but right now we're just not set up to do it well.
Okay, right. With your background at Grail, I think that's a natural fit for what you're investing in. Okay.
Exactly.
I'm wondering too, on the early stage, whiteboard side, what is it that you are really looking for in these entrepreneurs and early companies that, maybe would be an early signal even before seed Series A that this is a company that you would have conviction in, on one level to invest in, and then taking that a step further, what is a signal that we want to help co-found this company?
Right. Yeah, great questions. So one thing I always look at is, and every VC is different, and there's so much that is like what fits the bullet points on the website of the universe and the criteria we invest in. And then there's a double click to what does this actual human who will make the investment decision, what do they care about backing? And so I can really only speak for myself here more than for Jana. But, for me, after being a part of Grail and after sitting at Kleiner Perkins and seeing the things we backed that became really huge things, and Kleiner was an early investor in Genentech. I wasn't there, of course, when that investment was made. But then going to a place like Genomic Health, where I worked with Randy Scott, and Genomic Health is now their Oncotype DX is now the standard of care for all women with stage 2 breast cancer in the world. And then to go to Grail and work on something that was so ambitious. One of the first things I look at through the lens of evaluating a company and an entrepreneur is just sort of like, what does the world look like when you succeed? How is it different? And can I get really excited about that vision? Because what we all do is so hard. And, having this different world that exists because you were successful, that's sort of, for me, the reason you get up every morning and keep going. Because everybody hits challenges and speed bumps, and, it's a really important thing to be able to hold in your true north.
Right.
So that's one. And then the second is, just from a human perspective, is this a person that I want to be in the trenches with when we hit those speed bumps? Because they happen inevitably in every company. And, there are the known things you're going to encounter that will be hard, and then there are the unknowns. And you have to have, I think, a great working relationship. And I like to be the first call that my
Okay.
CEO makes, like, hey, uh-oh, that's for me the best feeling is, unfortunately, you get the uh-oh, the text that's like, hey, can you call me? But if you get,
Right.
it makes me happy to know that I get that text, because that's the relationship we should have, because if we're in it together, we can sort it out together. So I really look for, is this a person who we can build trust together over time, and who listens to feedback and who I can learn from. Like, it goes two ways. I don't know everything, and you're going to teach me and I'm going to teach you, and we know different things. So those are things sort of more qualitatively
Right.
that I get excited about and think about before I make an investment. And then when it comes down to, like, what do we fund versus what do we co-found, a little bit of that is just the timing of when you meet a person.
Okay.
And if we've done a lot of thesis work in an area and we are hunting, let's say, we know what good looks like, and we've kind of scoured the earth and we've met a bunch of companies in the space. If we meet a person who we find is like building the thing that we've known we were looking for all along, and maybe it's not
Right.
as far along as, someone who might come into us with a fully baked idea. And the other thing is, if we co-found, we want to be able to also add value. And so if what we would bring is completely duplicative of what they would already have, then maybe it's hey, let's stay in touch. We would love to fund your pre-seed or seed. Let us know how we can be helpful. That's really different. And come back and see us as soon as you want that first check, and let's keep working together. That's really different than let's co-found, let's share in some common, and give us some of the work to do in getting from where we are today to that first check in. And so we might, put a little bit of capital in, in a safe. We will also take on a little bit of the work, right? So depending on what that work might look like. And so that might be like a heavy technical team that has a very technical CEO, and they might want some help with, help me get my first few beta customers, and help me with some market research, and help me prepare my pitch more than maybe you would get from a situation where you're just going to write a check. And so
Okay.
that's where we might do some co-founding when it's much earlier.
Okay. In terms of, I guess, the companies that you have in your portfolio now,
Mm-hmm.
in the founders for those companies, the CEOs of those companies, do you feel like there's one common theme or personality trait that kind of ties everyone together?
Yeah. This is an interesting thing that we noticed as our portfolio was growing, is that many of the CEOs that we've backed have actually lived the problem they're trying to solve in some capacity in a former life as an operator or a scientist. And they have encountered this problem over and over and over in their career. And they're now like hell bent on solving it at last.
Right.
And so that is a thread that many of our CEOs have in common.
Okay. Yeah. Having gone through the struggles, I think really is motivating to solve it. So that's
Right.
exciting.
And they've sat in the shoes of their customer who they're ultimately selling to. So,
right.
yeah.
And I would also think that they've thought more about what risk looks like in terms of problem solving, ways that are better to approach than others.
Right.
Okay. And then in terms of, helping take a company from the very, very early stages through to long-term durability, what are some things that you think about from like a strategic perspective to help a company have that long-term timeline?
Yeah, it's a very good question. In many ways, companies are often living quarter to quarter, and then at the most, thinking about annual KPIs or OKRs, whatever the goals are. And then, of course, fundraise to fundraise. It's like, are you on track to hit those milestones that are going to enable you to live to fight another day? And I think there are some really important through lines that people need to keep in mind. And some of that has to do with the overall amount of capital you want to raise and how that impacts where you think you're going long term. And if you believe you're going to be an $8 billion company, raising $1 billion, which we did at Grail, we raised more than that, may be an okay strategy. But you got to really think about, entrepreneurs work so hard, and VCs are not the only people who are rewarded when a company exits.
Right.
So remembering that the common and where that sits in the stack and how everyone gets paid in the end, I ask entrepreneurs a lot, do you want to be rich or do you want to be king? And there's not a right answer to that. Some people have an exit in mind. Other people want to run the thing forever.
Right.
And they want to take it public, and it's like my way or the highway. And that mentality has to map to the business you're running. So I don't have a preference for one or the other, but the mentality does have to map to the actual business you're running and how big can it scale, and show me the company you're going to become when you grow up. Because very few companies can become, it's just pragmatic. If you had said, even Grail, show me the company you're going to become when you grow up. Well, I'm going to become Exact Sciences. I mean, there's one out there. There's not a ton. And they didn't exactly become Exact Sciences, but it's a very different company actually than Exact Sciences. But you can at least point to one very big company and say, I'm going to become that. And it's plausible that, okay, that makes sense. Your market size is similar. You can price similarly. You got a lot of regulatory hurdles and payment hurdles to get through, but
yeah,
so did they. So I think that's an important thing for entrepreneurs to keep in mind is sometimes you can get so in the weeds of living quarter to quarter to pick your head up and okay, for my next fundraise, I need $30 million because we got to do these things. But it's like, where are you going? And it's fine. You can be going on a 12-year journey. I'm here with you, but this is your journey, and you should kind of come out of the weeds and think about it every once in a while.
Right. Want to be aligned on that with you as well. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to dive into, I guess, the company type as well. So you talk about the companies that you're investing in are typically AI native, right? Nowadays, every company seems like it's AI native. So can you describe what that means? Like, what is it that you are looking for? And how do you know, like, what is good when you're looking at an AI native company?
Yeah. So, yes, everything is AI right now, even when it's not. And so we do have to sort of parse those apart. I think the biggest challenge, and I'll just kind of be blunt about this up front, is for companies that are just slapping AI on the cover. It's not that those aren't good businesses, and I understand why they're slapping AI on the cover. It's because they're trying to fundraise in a market where it's very difficult to fundraise if you don't put AI in front of it. I get it. And I think that's an unfortunate challenge of this market, because there are good companies out there that may not necessarily, for whatever reason, for their business, AI just might not be a core part of what enables their product to scale.
Right.
But that said, we do really have a set of criteria that we look at. And we like to kind of apply, there's like sort of 4 criteria. And we like to say that, again, we're kind of flexible in this framework, but that an AI native healthcare company or life sciences company typically demonstrates at least 3 of these criteria. So one is this sort of model-centric architecture, which means the core product or service is built on an AI model that learns, not just a rules-based system. We used to say that it had to be built on sort of proprietary AI models. I actually think those are becoming the proprietariness of the model is less important now. That used to be sort of everyone was like, well, which model are you running? And it's like, at this point, the models are not as important as what they're driving. And so I think that's an evolution that's happening right now in the field. So that's criteria number one. Number two is this data flywheel concept. And so that this part is important, the proprietary nature of it, that proprietary data is generated through the product usage or some kind of R&D loop that continuously improves the model performance. So even if you started with an off-the-shelf model, that your own business running improves the model performance, which creates competitive moat.
Right.
So that's another really important aspect.
Okay.
Then another is sort of an element of an AI-driven business model. So is there any element of your business where non-linear revenue scaling or unit economics defined by margin expansion are driven by AI in a way that wasn't possible before? And I think this actually can be true for almost any business as you think about the ways in which AI tools can be integrated into, sales organizations. There's many ways, that companies can tick that box. And then the fourth is sort of AI embedded intelligence. So increasingly, AI is driving decision making at the core of value creating workflows. So you can think of this in health tech as like in clinical research, in operational and administrative workflows. We see a lot of this on the health tech side.
Okay.
Also on the research side, R&D side. So we like to say that AI native healthcare companies have 3 of the 4 of those, and that is what we look at.
Okay, yeah. So really driving the decision making, and then not necessarily model specialization, but the proprietary data and feedback loop is important.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to dive a little bit deeper into what's proprietary and what's, important there. But for now, we're going to take a brief break. And when we come back, we'll discuss that more. And we'll also talk a bit about evidence generation and diagnostics.
Great.
This episode of the BioCentury Show is brought to you by the 13th China Healthcare Summit, taking place November 2nd to 4th in Shanghai. Everyone has an opinion about China biotech, but there's a difference between reading about cross-border deals and seeing it for yourself. The 13th China Healthcare Summit brings you to Shanghai November 2nd to 4th for a first-hand look at China's innovation moment. Join BioCentury, Bay Helix, and Insights partner McKinsey & Company for a deep dive into China's biopharma ecosystem and meet the biotech leaders who are driving all the news flow. Sourcing innovation, building new cos, generating faster clinical data, reimagining your R&D strategy. For a dozen years, the China Healthcare Summit has gathered the right people to network and build business. Now it's your chance to be in the room. Join us in Shanghai this November. Opt into the tour of Suzhou and a visit to Shanghai Clinical Trial Centers. See it for yourself. Register at biocenturychinasummit.com.
You're listening to the BioCentury Show, and I'm Lindsay Martin, joined today by Jessica Owens from Initiate Ventures. Jessica, thank you for sharing the different qualities that you're looking for in an AI native healthcare company. One of the things you mentioned before the break was that it's not really, about the model being proprietary anymore. It's more about the data that the company is generating and using that as a feedback loop. Can you talk a bit more about, what you're looking for in that type of business model in terms of, making something that is truly proprietary and innovative? What are some of the criteria that you're evaluating there?
Yeah. So I think, it's a little bit of back to basics. I think the industry got a little caught up in, which model are we funding and how special is that model?
Yeah.
And, in many ways, what we do doesn't change. This is just a little more fuel in the fire of the same playbook we've been funding for a long time, which is, are you building a product that solves a pain point for a big market customer? And do you understand the complex incentives of all the stakeholders that are going to enable that product to be successful? And so the model itself, of course, the models are important. I don't want to overstate that they're not. But the question is, how is AI actually helping you build the product for the right stakeholder? And how are you navigating the complex ecosystem that we know is healthcare? And that
Right.
is sort of industry specific and stakeholder specific. And so when we say stakeholder, there's the physicians, there are the patients, there are the clinical developers, there are the research scientists, and there are the regulators, and they all need AI to do a different job for them. And depending on the product you're building, that has to work in different ways with different levels of trust and safety.
Yeah.
And so this isn't just about, AI chatbots and the product itself being the AI. I think I'll give it back to my sort of company in our portfolio, IOB. They are using AI in the actual guts of the manufacturing of cells. And so the way that works is it's a closed loop system to build reproducible human cells at scale and starting with research. And so large R&D teams in global pharma companies use massive numbers of human cells for research. Think liver models, lung models, and
Right.
all kinds of cells. These are multi-billion-dollar markets. And this has been just an age-old pain point where, you have a ton of companies trying to solve this, and still no one has really done it well and scalable and in a reproducible way. And so I like to think of it as, how is AI enabling companies to solve historically intractable problems? And if you go even all the way back to Grail, I have to say, that was the first time I had ever worked with a data science team of that quality and that scale. And while we didn't have the sort of generative AI as we describe it today and know of it today, the neural networks and data science that we were using just to parse the massive amount of information coming off a
Right.
sequencer to build classifiers, while that's rooted in sort of old machine learning methods, we were at the very cutting edge of what was possible in terms of the data science that was done there. And it really kind of shined a light for me on what was going to be possible in the future. And so there was so much that came out of my experience of Grail that has colored how I think about what's going to be possible around the corner.
Yeah. In terms of, I guess, the type of data that you're getting, when I think diagnostics, I'm thinking about evidence generation for endpoints, and then also even companion diagnostics. What, how can AI help make better endpoints and better evidence generation? What are the ways that layers in to improve data quality, the quantity, and then the ways that maybe the problem is being like right sized to the population that it's supposed to help?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have a company in my portfolio, Tensor Bio, which is going after MASH. And MASH is a fibrotic liver disease. There's been a lot of therapeutic activity in the therapeutic development space, with several approvals in the last couple of years. And it's a degenerative fibrotic disease, so it progresses in the liver, gets sicker and sicker, and ultimately results in organ failure or hepatocellular carcinoma. And so in this company, in many ways, at the very beginning, you still have to do the upfront work of enrolling patients and getting the right cohort to do your discovery in. I think there's no shortcut around that step today.
Yeah.
There's no AI in the world that is going to allow you to not actually enroll the patients and get the biological samples you need. However, once you do that discovery, I think there are a number of steps that are, from the discovery perspective, that are enabled by, again, the computational methods that we have today that are not like generative AI, but are much more advanced than we had when I was working at Grail. So even the discovery phase is powered in a way that is very advanced compared to where we were even like 5, 10 years ago.
Right.
So that
And now
enables, a better product.
more accessible. Yeah.
Exactly. Fewer
Okay.
patients have to be enrolled. You can get more power in the discovery. You still have to enroll the right patients to get an accurate product. But then once you get to the point where you are then, kind of past the training and testing, the feedback loops that you can generate from understanding the patient population you serve, getting the de-identified data on the, positives, negatives, and doing registry type of work out in the field, you can actually make your test better over time. And there was this back and forth that with the FDA, we thought all of this was going to be regulated at the FDA level. Now that's been again thrown off the ship and looks like LDT and CLIA is sort of back for the foreseeable future. The good news about that is that it does allow this learning test to get better and better and better as you integrate learnings in the real world into your product. Once it's FDA approved, it's locked, and you have to submit back to the FDA anytime you want to change the test. And so I think this is a real opportunity for well-run diagnostics companies to actually improve their test over time using a lot of methods that will incorporate AI and learning once a product is on the market. So I think that's a huge opportunity.
In terms of early companies, that could choose to either develop these methods and generate the data on their own versus partnering with maybe like an EHR, electronic health record system, or kind of tapping into existing resources to get that patient data. Where do you kind of see the most value being created? And if, an early company has X amount of dollars, like how can they best get, the evidence needed for their patients?
Yeah, this is a tricky question because the answer is truly, it depends. It really depends. It really depends on the clinical question they're trying to answer. And unfortunately, there's still a lot of loosey-goosey, not great, high quality clinical development happening in diagnostics. And this is the downside of not having a sort of stricter regulatory body surrounding it, is that unfortunately the right evidence generation isn't happening. I see far too many pitches where it's like, what was your discovery cohort? And it's like 8 people plus all these EHR records. And it's like,
okay.
I don't know that it's, do you think that that's sufficient? But I do think there are opportunities. It depends on what you're trying to figure out. And so there's many opportunities where if you can get your hands on a ton of EHR records and truth, you always have to think, what's my gold standard? What's the intended use application of this product? And if you can get all of that from an EHR, then you're sitting on go. Good for you.
Right.
Oftentimes you have to go into enroll a specific patient population. And when that's the case, all the EHR data in the world isn't going to help you.
It's unhelpful. Yeah. No matter what the scale is. Okay.
Right.
Okay. And then I guess more broadly, you said there are so many challenges right now, and in the diagnostic space, like you said, Exact Sciences acquired by Abbott, like there's these big deals that think of like a diagnostics mega deal. And even today, we had Tempest AI announcing the acquisition of Personalis.
Oh, right.
So when you're thinking about, driving value and having the dream team of, being acquired in your company that you're supporting, like what are some of those, bigger term goals and higher strategy that you're thinking about to get a company to that stage where they could be acquired like that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I actually think these acquisitions in many ways are good for small companies because they create playbooks that you can look to and say, hey, so are you a Personalis or are you a Natera? Like where do you see your business going? And if you are looking to become a public company, like what has to be true Like
Hmm.
billion to one. That was a great IPO. Like, there's been some good IPOs this
Yeah.
year and last year. So it gives diagnostics companies playbooks to look to and to say what must be true about my business for me to believe that that's the path I'm on. Right. And you
Right.
can look at the revenue, look at the margins, read the S1. The data's all there. So I actually think it's good for small companies because it gives them sort of a guidepost.
Right. To have an example
Yeah.
to help right size, yeah, from the
Yeah.
beginning. Okay.
And the big
Right.
companies are getting, while it may not be the best to have, I've been thinking about this a lot. I mean, Exact Sciences hasn't acquired a company in a good while. And so, were they out there hunting for small companies to buy? Not recently. They had in the past. And so, as each of these big and bigger companies continues to acquire, they're all competing with each other,
Right.
right? And so, how's LabCorp going to stay relevant? We haven't heard from Quest in a long time. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so, I'm hopeful that there continues to be an acquisition market for these smaller companies. And I think there also needs to be some reality around, how big a business can you build? I believe that these MASH companies, that market is big enough to build a really big business. There are
Okay.
20 million patients with active disease and 80 million patients with precursor disease. And when you think about, let's say, oncology, which supports all of liquid biopsy today, there are
Right.
18 million active cancer survivors walking around in the United States today, and only about 2 million new cancer cases a year. And so comparing those two
Yeah.
markets, I mean, MASH is massive.
Yeah, I wanna ask one kind of follow-up question on that to round out our session here.
Yeah.
But can you talk a little bit about what a successful fibrosis test looks like that's non-invasive, right? I know you're a portfolio company that's in this space working on a blood test, but fibrosis is such a hard thing to stage non-invasively,
Yeah.
right? So for this space to be successful, that is kind of a prerequisite, would you say?
Yes, yeah. So I think there's a couple different products that are needed. And I think of them even in one disease indication, there are different products along the way. Just like in oncology, multi-cancer early detection is
Yeah.
different than MRD, right? All oncology, but very different products. And so with fibrosis and MASH, um, there's are we getting the patients and diagnosing them? And there are kind of not that great, but okay screening methods to find the patients. Largely patients who are diabetic and obese, and all patients who are diabetic should be screened. And
Right.
there's some mediocre blood tests. What we know is that they are underdiagnosed. But now with drugs on the market, there were no drugs until 2024 to treat these patients. So the standard of care wasn't really being followed because screening patients for MASH, it was kind of like, what's the point? We
Right.
can't treat them with anything, and we're already telling them diet and exercise, diet and exercise. There's no new prescription. So now
Hmm.
that we have drugs on the market, I think more and more patients will be screened. But then once you find out if you have MASH, there's four categories. There's F1, F2, F3, F4. Those are the stages of fibrosis. And what patients really need to know is how advanced is my disease, and if
And
it
how
is
quick?
right, how far along am I? Because if you're not sick enough, then you're not sick enough to be on, let's say, Resdifra is one of the drugs that's approved for MASH. You have to be F2 and higher. Um, so you need to know how advanced is your disease.
Right.
And then once you're put on a drug, you need to know, am I getting better or not? Am I responding to this drug or not? And so to the product that I think is important and should be out there, and this is, what Tensor Bio is building, is something that can actually stage disease over time and can tell a patient, your score was X on this day and you've progressed to X plus one. That means your drug is not working. You need another
Right.
intervention. And with so many drugs in the pipeline right now for MASH, I do believe this is going to become over time a combination therapy regimen where patients may be on more than one drug, or switched off one drug or another. I think many of them will be on GLP-1 plus some other MASH drug.
Yeah, and I see MASH as a hot indication to differentiate away from obesity as well for these drug developers.
Right.
But Jessica, thank you so much for your time. We're going to end on that note because that's all we have time for today on the BioCentury Show. But it was a pleasure speaking with you. And we'll wrap on that.
All right. Thanks, Lindsay.
Brought to you by the 13th China Healthcare Summit. Join BioCentury, Bay Helix, and Insights partner McKinsey & Company in Shanghai, November 2nd to 4th, for a first-hand look at China's innovation moment.
Kendall Square Orchestra provides the music for the BioCentury Show. The group connects science and technology professionals and other members of the greater Boston community to collaborate, innovate, and inspire through music while supporting causes related to healthcare and education.